Hi, I'm Ken Steele. Welcome to another 10 with Ken. We're back in Eduvation's brand chemistry lab, where we analyze higher ed marketing campaigns and brand identities. At 10withken.com, you'll find a dozen previous episodes detailing visual identity redesigns, mostly at Canadian colleges. But as I spend more and more time working with institutions outside Canada, I thought it was high time we broadened our scope. I've spent months examining institutional rebrands worldwide, and have analyzed more than 100 from the past 24 months. The vast majority were American, but there were some interesting examples too from Canada, Europe, Asia, and Australia. In the next few episodes, we're going to take a look at the top 10 rebrands, and at a dozen branding misfires that outrage students, faculty, and alumni. But this week, I'm going to distill what we can learn from 105 higher ed rebrandings about the 10 biggest trends in visual identities. Let's take 10 and take a look. 10 with Ken is an almost weekly look at North American higher education news, trends, technology, pedagogy, branding, marketing, and bright ideas. Brought to you by Eduvation. Over the past 2 years, we found 105 higher ed visual identity redesigns, largely at universities or four-year colleges and at two-year or community colleges. But 1/4 were for religious colleges, and 6 were for arts institutes, which have their own unique challenges. Within each of those 4 sectors, there's ironically a ton of consistency in the way institutions attempt to differentiate themselves. We're going to look at 10 consistent design trends in new institutional identities launched worldwide in the past 2 years.
I see skies of blue.
Maybe it's a fluke of the human retina, but people's favorite colors tend to cluster around red and blue on the spectrum, and worldwide, corporate identities are particularly likely to be blue. Brands aspire to blue sky thinking, blue chip stability, and true blue dependability. So you may not be surprised that more than 40% of higher ed makes the conservative choice. Religious colleges are even more likely to play it safe. More than 2/3 of their new logos were blue. In the past 2 years, 1 in 5 institutions across post-secondary have opted for red. It's a high-energy color, suggesting speed and youth, which is why so many fast food restaurants use it. And of course, it's the color of some of the world's most revered academic brands, like Harvard, McGill, Queen's, and more. Blue and red account for 2/3 of recent brand identities, but there were other colors too. Green, often combined with gold, is quite popular among community colleges or those emphasizing their connection with the great outdoors. Purple has plenty of adherents, particularly at universities. The combination of yellow or orange with black really seems to be trending too. Several institutions refuse to choose a single spot on the color spectrum, opting instead for black as their official color or a broad spectrum of colors. Carr University of Art and Design in Vancouver was using a colorless coil of wire as their visual identity, reflecting their building's history as a former wire factory. But this spring, as it prepares to move to a new campus, Carr unveiled a new, more dynamic and colorful identity, intended to evoke a painter's palette. Some say if you look closely, the curves also suggest a lowercase e, c, and u. Well, maybe. From the wax impression of a nobleman's signet ring, the circular seal has long been a shape that inspires confidence and trust. Many higher ed institutions possess historic seals, often with Latin or Greek mottos, and some display them with great pride. What is it about Texas? But lately, higher ed institutions have been shelving their seals, keeping them for ceremonial purposes, of course, but replacing them with streamlined, more modern visual identities. They often blame the demands of digital reproduction, or the desire to sell more branded merchandise with a more wearable logo. But while the seal is becoming less popular, another medieval symbol of heritage and authority is in the ascendant.
Shields!
Almost 1/3 of recent higher ed brands have adopted a shield-like icon, or revived a streamlined version of their coat of arms. 40% of all new university logos feature shields, and 56% of religious institutions have adopted a shield for their new look. Just 2 community colleges followed suit. It's often a big improvement to reverse a visual icon out of a shield rather than floating it above a word mark. But sometimes it looks a bit like insecurity when smaller, private institutions try to leverage the historical pedigree of a coat of arms for their brands. Some big state players have recently done the same, like the University of Georgia or Oregon State. Taking the quest for wearability even further, some institutions have been adopting more athletic institutional brands. 10 institutions have recently abandoned monogram logos featuring linked initials. Some were getting tired, and others were just downright ugly. But at the same time, a dozen other institutions started using initials or monograms, often to echo the varsity letters worn by athletes. The universities of Kentucky and New Mexico surprised many by abandoning well-known, easily recognizable logos that had been in use for decades. Perhaps to hedge their bets, Bradley put their varsity initial on a shield. And Detroit Mercy's new identity just cries out to be placed on a hockey jersey. One of the biggest rebrands of the past 2 years was Penn State, which focused their new shield emblem on a more photorealistic face of the Nittany Lion Shrine on campus. We'll talk more about the backlash against that change in our upcoming episode on branding misfires. Likewise, Tennessee Tech and Upper Iowa University adopted new logos that were more tightly associated with their athletics mascots, the Golden Eagles and the Peacocks. And Michigan Tech integrated the campus statue of Blizzard the Husky into their revised visual identity. Lately, shields and animal mascots have been much more trendy among universities than community colleges. They went in another direction. Almost 1 in 5 new logos feature the circle, almost all of them at community colleges. And in fact, almost half the community college logo redesigns used the circle, thanks in particular to a system-wide rebrand of 10 colleges in Arizona's Maricopa County. To create a more unified system identity for Maricopa County, the new system was supposed to roll out gradually from May 2015 until July 2018. But 2 years later, there's still no sign any of the member colleges have started updating their identities. Israel's Tel Aviv University adopted a new logo that features not just one circle, but 3. Read from right to left, the image is intended to convey the pursuit of knowledge, from confusion to clarity. I think it looks especially interesting in a long ribbon of circular icons. Of course, shields and circles aren't the only options. Not that long ago, it was the trendy thing to create visual identities within a solid block of color. And in the past 2 years, half a dozen institutions have gone boxy with their new logos, from Suffolk to Sweden. But at the same time, there were twice as many institutions that unwrapped their visual identities and threw away the boxes. At least when square logos get too complicated, it would seem they're no longer hip. More than 1/4 of all new identities make their distinctiveness concrete by emphasizing an aspect of campus architecture. Typically, the focus seems to be an aspirational, elevated detail, like a clock tower, bell tower, cupola, turret, or steeple. Quite often, though, the visual pulls out an archway, window, or colonnade. The new icon for the University of Findlay combines the keystone, the arch, and the bell tower of Old Main. Winston-Salem State explains the significance of their archway.
The shield represents the strength of our community and the commitment of our faculty and staff to provide a safe and supportive environment. The skyline symbolizes our community engagement and desire to make a difference in the world. And finally, the arch is symbolic of the history and traditions of our university, including our students' transition from lambs to rams.
Augusta State merged with Georgia Health Sciences to form Georgia Regents University. But in 2015, it was renamed Augusta University. In 2016, they adopted a great new logo that's simultaneously the letter A and a bell tower. But that bell tower doesn't even exist. Otis College of Art and Design in Los Angeles makes extremely subtle reference to campus architecture in their new wordmark. The filled-in rectangular letters actually represent the windows in the Amundsen building, which was constructed years ago for IBM, to look like a computer punch card. Quite a few of the before logos also featured campus architecture, but frequently just a poor line drawing of a notable campus building floating next to a wordmark. This style seems to be on its way out. There were even 2 that looked like roofing company logos. What were they thinking? Well, in the case of Manor College, they were obviously thinking they wanted to downplay that Christian cross atop their steeple. For decades now, I've seen religiously affiliated colleges dropping Christian iconography from their visual identities in order to appeal to a broader, more diverse student market. So it's not surprising that we see plenty of religious or formerly religious colleges shifting towards less explicitly Christian logos. There's no shortage of examples. New Jersey's College of St. Elizabeth did a beautiful job on their new brand, which is simultaneously a letter E and the flame of knowledge. Of course, torches are still pretty strongly associated with Christian colleges. Missouri St. Louis University did a particularly elegant job. We'll take a closer look at it in our upcoming episode on the top 10 rebrands. On the other hand, watch for our episode on brand misfires, where we'll take a closer look at the disastrous rebrand effort at Wheaton College in Massachusetts. Lately, it's been especially popular among community colleges to reflect local geography in their new logos. Rocking down the line. 9 institutions adopted new visual identities emphasizing the landscape of their local region, usually mountains or rivers, but sometimes even an urban skyline. As you can see, mountains are particularly popular. To emphasize their role helping students find moral and career direction in their lives, 6 institutions have adopted new identities that focus on directional arrows, compasses, or wayfinders. This seems most popular among universities and religious colleges. The compass seems particularly appropriate for Greenwich University, situated near the Prime Meridian. A bit more subtle is the box-like shield of the University of Suffolk, with its yellow triangle pointing out its location in the southeast of England. We'll come back to that one in our upcoming review of the top 10 rebrands. Finally, let's focus on the finest of typographical details, the tiny little serifs at the edges of some typefaces. I know, as a former graphic designer and a student of Renaissance typesetting, I'm kind of a typography geek. Just bear with me. Selected and set properly, typefaces with serifs often feel fancier and more traditional. So no surprise, they're often preferred by four-year colleges or religious institutions as opposed to community colleges or arts institutes. In fact, 92% of the before logos for religious colleges used serif type. All but 2 of them. About a third of them shifted away from serifs in their redesigns. But the trend is the opposite among four-year colleges and universities. 2/3 of universities using serifs became 3/4 after the redesign, whereas half of community colleges became about a quarter. Unlike community colleges, universities are increasingly likely to use serifs in their word marks. Although it's often a slab serif typeface, not so much for elegance as to suggest collegiate athletics. Absolutely no arts institutes used serifs before or after their redesign. They all want the clean, modernist aesthetic of a sans serif typeface. So that is what 105 higher ed rebrands can tell us about trends in visual identities over the past 2 years. Shields, circles, mountains, and architecture are all hot, while clearly seals, squares, serifs, and crosses are just not. Next time we'll have a little fun using what we've learned and designing 4 committee-proof logos, one for each category of institution. Then we'll be back for an in-depth look at the top 10 higher ed rebrands of the past 2 years, and a special look at 12 redesigns so spectacularly bad they sparked outrage and student protests. In many cases, the new logos were completely abandoned, just like some of those we talked about in our episode last year on cautionary tales. To be sure you don't miss them, take a moment now to join more than 13,000 subscribers and followers on any of a dozen platforms. You'll find links to these channels and an email subscription form on our website at 10withken.com. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you next time. 10 with Ken is a production of Eduvation, Inc., copyright 2017. I'm available for conference keynotes, campus PD events, board retreats, and committee workshops, in person or now virtually too. For more information, please visit www.eduvation.guru or 10withken.com.